Bob from Bob's Workshop. Today I'd like to show you a mixture of Lionel F3 projects that I've worked on over the past few years. There are some powered units, there's a dummy unit or two, and there's even a dummy B unit that received custom paint by me. Custom decals too. But I'm going to start off with a project that I really like. I don't own anything else from the Northern Pacific, but I always admired the paint schemes of their diesel locomotives. So I found a blank Lionel shell and I decorated it for the Northern Pacific. And that's where this video begins.
It's not as common as the Santa Fe War Bonnet or the New York Central's Lightning Stripe, but I've always admired the colors of the Northern Pacific Diesels. $156 for a brand new, unpowered locomotive, or even $89 for a motorized but repainted unit, don't really seem like my best options though. Sometimes it's nice to start with a blank canvas, and I was able to buy this shell online for only $20. I have a feeling it's a reproduction, but the molding is crisp and everything lines up with the mounting points of a genuine Lionel frame. The first color I need to spray will be the glossy white. It will serve as the belt line or dividing color between the two greens. It's going to make masking for those colors much easier down the road. It's going to be nearly a week before this is cured to the point where I can safely apply masking tape over it. I don't want the overall application of paint to be too thick, so I'll use the shell's natural lines to spray as little white as possible. The white went on very well. Now I just have to be patient enough to leave it alone. Applying the next layer of masking tape too soon will result in a textured pattern upon removal, which is the last thing I want with glossy white. I also want it to be smooth, not only for appearance's sake, but because a smooth surface is better for preventing seepage under the tape when it comes time for the surrounding colors. I'm pushing the tape down as much as I can, and I'm using a paper towel to avoid transferring any oils from my skin onto the areas that will be painted next. Both greens are a satin finish and tend to dry more quickly than the gloss. The lighter color I'd consider to be a truer satin finish. For some reason, maybe temperature or humidity, the darker green is a lot shinier. It would have been nice to find decals specifically for an O-gauge F unit, but I think I can make these work. They're from microscale and are meant for an HO scale caboose. But the circular logos are about the right size, and now I have a few extra for later projects. Perhaps a Lionel F-3 Diesel? I think so. The front end is a little plain. Grab rails on either side of the decal would have helped, so maybe I'll drill holes and add those in the future. My diesel will not be prototypically correct, but I think it'll still look pretty good when I'm done. When I ordered the blank shell, I also added the cab glass, roof horns, and the headlamp lens. And after buying all those things, plus the paint and decals, my expenses are approaching the $50 mark. Maybe I should have just bought the completed brand new dummy unit. But where's the fun in that? This is a dummy unit that my daughter bought for me this Christmas. The shell is in great shape, except for that nose decal. And since it's part of the family now, it will be sharing its base with my new Northern Pacific F3 shell. The paint is so nice, including the graphics behind the cab door, but the decal is falling apart. Luckily, reproduction decals are available, so I'll fix this eventually, but the frame is what I need right now, and it's in pretty darn good shape. There were a few other decals meant for an HO scale caboose. I'm talking about the white lettering in the light green areas. It's small, but I decided to use them anyway. I won't apply a clear coat, however. Just in case I get sick of them, they could always be removed. If you enjoy model railroading, you'll know what this is. And even if you're not in the hobby, if someone were to mention Lionel trains, chances are that this locomotive is what you'd picture. More sellers on eBay seem to be including the Make Offer button with their ads, which I like because this particular seller accepted my offer of $5 for this well-used but complete shell. $6.35 for shipping plus sales tax brought my total to just a little over $12, which isn't bad for a project that will fill up my next week or so. The number boards are missing, so I'm not exactly sure what model this is, but it's probably from the early 1950s. So that means 70 years have gone by since this was new, and judging by its condition, I'd guess that it's passed through several owners. And the base, well, who knows where that is. It's probably now under a different shell, or it's been split up for parts. So what's a classic Lionel shell worth these days? Well, in this condition, apparently $5. So I'm not too worried about affecting its value by refurbishing some of the paintwork. Cleaning and degreasing will give me a better idea of how much work lies ahead. The paint is very thin, especially in the areas where people would likely grab and pick it up. But none of the scratches or nicks are very deep, so wet sanding with 220 or 400 grit paper should be enough to blend in the damaged areas into the surrounding paint. This old decal is pretty tough, and it takes a long time to sand through it and down to the original base color. While I'm there, I'll also feather any nicks into the undamaged areas. Picasso had his blue period, where that was the dominant color in his work. This may be my red period, or more accurately, my Santa Fe era. Ford red is pretty darn close to the original color that Lionel would have used on these post-war locomotives, and this particular shell is the third that I've worked on that features the Santa Fe war bonnet paint scheme. In the background, you can see another Santa Fe shell that I'm working on. It must have been dropped because the nose has been cracked. I'll have a complete video on that repair later. The liquid in this bottle will help the new decal adhere to the fresh paint, and it will also soften the decal, allowing it to better conform to the door frame behind it. The decal has been softened, and I'm gently trying to push it into the irregular space behind. It will only stretch so much before it splits, so I need to be extra careful. I was able to reuse almost all of the original trim pieces, And luckily, I had some blank number board lenses that fit just fine. I forgot to really talk about it earlier, but I didn't want to redo the lettering, so I masked over them, kinda loosely, and also I sprayed very lightly, in hopes of avoiding a hard-edged masking line between the old silver and the new. Like most things, one side turned out better than the other, but overall, I'm still pretty happy with the result. I borrowed a base from another train just to see what my shell might look like as a finished model. For some reason, I've been enjoying Lionel Santa Fe Diesels lately. I've restored 2 F3s and an Alco, but something is missing. Maybe I need an F3 B-unit, but they seem kind of expensive. And because of my repainting, an original unit might not match up too well. It might just be easier to find one to repaint myself. I'm too cheap to pay even $50 for something I'll repaint. And then there's this shell for $9.95 that looked pretty good at first, until you saw the end that probably got too close to the stove. Dude, why is your B unit even in the kitchen? Jeez. There's a guy I know from the train shows, and we've actually become pretty decent friends. He had a table at a swap meet last year. This wasn't on it, or someone else would have snapped it up before me. He was actually saving it specifically for me because he knows how I like to repaint trains. I hesitate to mention the price because it was super low, but finding a good deal or bargain is a big part of my channel. This is brand new, and it's unpainted, but he let me have it for only, wait for it, $20. Yes, that's right. And I have no repairs to make, no nicks to touch up. I don't even have to do any wet sanding. And I love me some wet sanding. This is going to be a treat for me, and it's also an opportunity to demonstrate some basic painting and masking techniques. One or two viewers have asked for more info on masking, so I'll take a little bit of this video to show those steps in greater detail. I can't find any of the usual markings that would firmly identify this as a genuine Lionel product. But if it's a reproduction, then it's a very, very high quality one. All of the subsequent colors will be sprayed on top of or around the yellow stripe. It goes on first, because I think I have a small roll of Tamiya's modeler's tape that is the perfect thickness to indicate the stripe of Lionel's original F3, about 3 millimeters or so. A few days have gone by and the yellow has cured enough so that I can safely put tape on it without leaving a mark later. I'm pretty sure this is 3 millimeters, and I'm placing the tape so that I also leave 3 millimeters below it for when I spray the red. When I apply the masking tape, I have a starting point that I hold down with my left hand while stretching, pulling, and guiding the other end with my right hand. Flat black is the next color I'll spray for 2 reasons. It dries much more quickly than the glossy colors, which means I can mask it sooner to spray the next color, which will be red. I'm pretty sure that the yellow is completely dry, but I still don't want to leave masking tape on it any longer than I need to. The 3 millimeter tape is still protecting the yellow stripe, and now I'll add more tape and paper above it for the next color. The red spray paint is glossy and dries more slowly, so I'll spray a very light coat at first, which should form a bit of a seal against seepage. It also helps to spray away from the leading edge of the tape instead of shooting the paint right at that area, where it would be more likely to go underneath. Silver is always the last color I apply. The yellow and the red stripes should end up being 3 millimeters wide, but I want the black to be about 1.5 millimeters wide. So I'll lay down the 3 millimeter tape about halfway up the yellow stripe, which should give me the thickness that I want. Because half of 3 is 1.5, so covering half of the yellow should give me a black stripe 1.5 millimeters in width. Right? Yeah. A little more blue painter's tape, and then outside to spray. But before that, here's a peek at my next and probably last Santa Fe themed project. It's another F3 shell, but this one has some nose damage. Notice how I start off spraying away from the tape's edge, at least until that first light coat has dried enough to prevent paint from seeping through. Oddly enough, I think this silvery aluminum color dries even more quickly than the flat black. I'm anxious at this point because there's always some question about paint seepage underneath the tape, but when everything has gone as planned, I can honestly say that this is my favorite part. And so far, so good. One side to go. Will it be as nice as this? I sure hope so. I can't help but sound a little boastful with what I'm about to say, but I think this is probably as good as anything Lionel would have done on one of these in the 1950s. I'm extremely happy with these stripes. And the silver. I bought these from eBay, and they didn't work at all. So, I decided to make my own decals with my computer and an inkjet printer. I printed them, sprayed them with a flat clear coat, cut them out, and now they can go onto the painted shell. I'm really happy with the paint, but a little less than satisfied with the homemade graphics. The visible outline of the clear decal is very slowly eating away at my soul, and I may end up removing them altogether. But they can stay for now. The stripes on this B unit match up pretty well with the ones on this earlier F3A unit that I worked on, so that's a good thing. Maybe the whole point of the video was the paint and masking as a tutorial. It may help if I look at it that way. To find out if I still have a stomach lining, tune in to my next video about the Santa Fe F3 with the broken nose. Until then, thanks for watching.
Hello, I'm Bob from Bob's Workshop. In 2023, I bought a set of diesel locomotives from trains.com. It's an F3 set from Lionel, decorated in the New York Central's lightning stripe paint scheme. Online, they were listed at $103, but I had a discount code which brought the price down to $93, which isn't too bad. These are not perfect. They need a little work. In this episode, I'm going to try to make the dummy unit look better. So, here it is. I think it turned out pretty nice. I think it looks okay. Let me know what you think after watching the video. So, here it is.
These Lionel F3s are from trains.com. One is a powered unit, and I also have a dummy, which I believe were introduced around 1983. The shells I have are both numbered 8370. The dummy A unit should actually be 8372, and there was also a dummy B unit offered, which I don't have, and that should be number 8371. So what I have are shells for two powered units, and that's okay with me. If you're a collector of O-gauge trains, I think it's pretty much mandatory that you own Lionel F3s decorated in Santa Fe's war bonnet paint scheme, as well as a set of lightning stripe New York Central Diesels. Mine are far from new, but they are undamaged and complete. Nearly all of the nicks and marks are confined to the dark gray paint just above the uppermost white stripe. So, I had an idea. Wet sanding is not a very glamorous part of any restoration or rejuvenation, but it is essential if you're blending nicked paint into the surrounding areas. I sped this up because it took longer than I thought to wet sand the shell, but the prep work now will really be worth it after the new color goes on. I removed a lot more of the old paint than I expected, but all of the sanding is confined to the area above the uppermost white stripe. Everything below is still pretty good, including the nose decal. Tamiya masking tape is what I use when I want very crisp lines between colors. It's fairly thin, and the adhesive is good at preventing paint from seeping underneath, while also still being gentle to the existing surface below. I debated about repainting the base and truck side frames for about 10 seconds. I want this to look as close to new as possible, so I'm taking it all apart and even removing this aftermarket soundboard as well. I think it may just be a horn, but I couldn't get it to work, so everything is going back to a stock configuration. This is my first F3 decorated for New York Central. It's one of just a handful of Lionel Diesels that don't feature a black base or apron. Here they're both dark gray instead. So I think, since I'm respraying the shell's roof, I'll use the same color on the frame and the front apron. Hopefully, this will help hide the slight difference between the original dark gray and the somewhat lighter shade of dark gray that I'm respraying. I start off with the lightest of coats for two reasons. A very light dusting of spray paint helps to seal the edge between the shell and the tape. A heavier coat with a lot of paint usually leads to the new color seeping under the tape. The second reason for a light first coat is because I sanded down to the bare plastic in several spots. Sometimes Rust-Oleum can raise a weird texture on plastic if it goes on too heavily. A light first coat helps to prevent that. And now for the moment of truth. If you've noticed the glossiness of the new paint, that's because it's only been on for about 20 minutes. I found that if I remove the tape quickly after spraying, I end up with less of a raised edge. I just have to be really careful taking the tape off. Is it better or worse? For me, that's almost a rhetorical question, because I've put so much time and effort into this train, and I'm the one who has to look at it. So for me, I definitely think it's better. But there are those who might argue that it's only original once, and that any alterations or restorations ruin authenticity and value. While there's some truth in that, I plan on keeping this for a long time, and I really like it. I enjoy the process of doing the work, and I'm also going to like looking at it on my shelf. After applying a $10 discount code because my order was over $50, this Lionel F3 set was $98 before shipping. It runs pretty well, and I didn't realize until just this week that the powered unit had dual motors and magnet traction. I have other F3s, but they are all of the single motor variety. These New York Central shells both share the same cab number, so it's not a matching set. There are numerous nicks and scratches on the shells, but somehow nearly all of those are confined to the area above the white paint of the lightning stripe. It's mainly for that reason that this F3 set has now found a permanent home with me. I worked on the unpowered unit first, mainly because the frame would be simpler to take apart and repaint. The gray is just a bit lighter than the original, but since the repainted parts are separated by the lightning stripe graphics, I don't think it's too noticeable, and I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. The color difference is easier to spot when the two are nose to nose. The original gray had a little more brown in it, but this is close enough. So now I'm finally going to tackle the powered unit. I'm not sure why the sides were spared from the wear that the base and roof section went through, but it's a good thing. Keeping the original graphics will be key in the refreshening of this train's appearance. At a quick glance when I'm done, this should look like a well-preserved original Lionel F3. Tamiya masking tape is offered in a variety of widths. I think it goes all the way down to 2 or even 1 millimeter. I mostly use the 3 millimeter tape because I can bend it around curves, but for big straight sections like these, the 10 millimeter tape does the job much more quickly. Until I bought this New York Central set, I never knew that the white stripes on the nose were decals. The other white stripes are painted, but not on the nose. I think that the Tamiya tape is a little more gentle than the blue painter's tape. As long as I've been using it, and I've been careful when lifting it away after painting, so far it hasn't damaged any of the decals. And the blue tape is fine for attaching paper to the shells over the Tamiya tape. That still seems safe. And also, the blue tape is a whole lot cheaper. This part is a little risky, but I've found that it's usually worth taking the chance. I sprayed a satin finish paint, and you can see here that it's still really shiny, so that means it's quite wet. But if I'm very careful and I remove the tape right after spraying, there seems to be less of a raised line between the old color and the fresh paint. I've messed this up before, and it leaves me in a bad mood for at least the next day, but it goes smoothly here. Getting the frame and truck assemblies ready for paint is pretty much like I did for the shell. Dawn dishwashing soap, a toothbrush, and wet sanding removes any grease and dirt. After drying, it's out to the driveway for Rust-Oleum Satin Canyon Black. It's one of my favorites for Lionel trains because it's a great match for side frames, couplers, passenger car roofs, steam locomotives, and even the top of any Lionel diesel decorated for Amtrak. It's a very versatile color. Who knew that carburetor cleaner would remove not only grease, but also paint? But that's fine with me. And now I'll spray the apron and the frame with Rust-Oleum Satin Charcoal Gray. It's the same color, the same paint that I used on the shell. Needless to say, I oiled the motors and applied new grease to the gears before putting the powered base back together. I also reinstalled the roof horns, number boards, grab handles, and cab glass off camera. You already know how to do that, and your time is valuable, so I don't want to waste it. I'd rather keep these moments that we share special and meaningful. Thank you for spending part of your day with me here watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. And until next time, this has been Bob's Workshop. Take care.